Valerie Knox placed my family's serialized ranch keys beside the HOA evacuation map and announced that Sagebrush Ridge finally controlled its second emergency exit. The room was packed with homeowners, insurance representatives, and county officials. Her brother stood behind her with the work order she had used to remove, the keys from my ranch office. Then Fire Chief Rachel Ortega examined the ring. None of those keys opened the emergency access system. The lawful evacuation key was still sealed, inside the fire district's responder box, exactly where it had remained for years. Valerie's brother had taken keys controlling my livestock gates, equipment buildings, and private operating areas instead. But Valerie still believed maintenance payments and an old developer map gave the HOA control of my bridge and ranch. Lane, they did not. Naomi placed the complete recorded agreement on the table. Valerie thought possession of my keys proved ownership. Instead, those keys were about to prove the HOA had crossed onto the one ranch controlling the infrastructure its entire insurance plan depended upon. 7 months before Valerie Knox placed my family's keys on an HOA conference table, Red Willow Ranch was still operating the way it had for 3 generations. Property covered a little more than 600 acres of high desert, foothills west of Sagebrush Ridge, grassland stretched toward distant red mesas, broken by cattle pastures, horse pens, rocky slopes, and a seasonal creek lined with old cottonwood trees. Near the center of the ranch stood a long barn with a faded red metal roof. The ranch house sat farther uphill, built from white stucco and dark timber with a deep-shaded porch facing the corrals. A weathered stone equipment building stood beside the service yard, while steel livestock gates divided the working areas of the property. Nothing about the ranch was decorative. Every fence, road, gate, cattle guard, water line, and storage area had a practical purpose. I had inherited responsibility for those systems from my father. The brass master key ring had belonged to him before it belonged to me. Each key carried a stamped serial number, matching a register inside the ranch office. One opened the veterinary storage room. Another controlled the main cattle loading gate. Others belonged to equipment buildings, medicine cabinets, internal service gates, the pump enclosure, and several livestock handling areas. My father had built the register. Himself, he believed that a working ranch stayed safe only when everyone knew who controlled each gate and why. I carried the ring only when operations required it. Most days, it remained locked on a marked board inside the ranch gate office. To anyone else, it looked like a collection of old brass keys. To me, it represented a chain of responsibility running through every part of the property. Red Willow had not always shared a boundary with the neighborhood. Decades earlier, my grandfather had sold part of the eastern acreage to a developer. The family retained the agricultural core, including the ranch house, barns, pastures, bridge, creek corridor, and western service lane. Sagebrush Ridge was eventually built on the land beside us. The development grew into 138 stucco and stone homes arranged along landscaped desert roads. It had a gated entrance, clubhouse, pool, walking paths, decorative equestrian signs, and carefully maintained medians filled with native plants. From the neighborhood's western edge, Red Willow looked like undeveloped open space. It was not. It was an active cattle and horse operation with daily schedules, private working zones, heavy equipment, livestock movements, and gates that existed to protect animals as much as property. For years, the relationship between the ranch and Sagebrush Ridge remained limited and manageable. The community had one ordinary entrance connecting to the county road. During the original development process, officials also identified a possible secondary evacuation route through the western boundary. That route crossed a lane on Red Willow, passed over our privately owned stone and steel bridge, continued through a fenced ranch corridor, and eventually reached another county road. The arrangement made sense for emergencies. Wildfires, flooding, Road damage or an accident near the main entrance could leave the neighborhood with only one practical exit. The ranch lane offered another route without requiring the county to build a new road through difficult terrain, but the route was never intended for ordinary neighborhood traffic. It remained closed during normal conditions. Sagebrush Ridge contributed toward part of the bridge inspections, hydrant testing, and maintenance of the large firewater tank located near the ranch boundary. Those contributions supported the emergency system. They did not transfer ownership of it. The bridge belonged to Red Willow. So did the lane, the gates, the cattle guards, the water tank, and the hydrant connection. For genuine emergencies, the county fire district controlled access. A sealed responder key box had been installed near the western gate. Fire Chief Rachel Ortega's department inspected the system and kept a record each time the box was tested or opened. Firefighters never needed my personal master ring. If a declared evacuation or active emergency occurred, authorized responders could open the designated gate through their own controlled system. That arrangement had functioned quietly for years. Annual tests were completed. The emergency lane remained clear. Bridge inspections were coordinated with the ranch. No resident had ever been trapped because I refused to open a gate. At the time, the system felt ordinary. Later, I understood that the sealed key box answered the most important question before Valerie ever asked for my keys. Valerie became president of Sagebrush Ridge after campaigning on wildfire readiness, stronger security, and higher property values. She had worked as a regional commercial property manager and viewed every shared system through the lens of centralized control. Valerie disliked arrangements. The board could not operate directly. The ranch lane bothered her because it appeared on community emergency maps. Yet the HOA could not open it whenever it wanted. The bridge supported Sagebrush Ridge's evacuation plan, yet the HOA did not own it. Homeowners helped pay certain maintenance expenses, yet Red Willow remained responsible for ordinary access. To me, those limits were clear. To Valerie, they looked inefficient. Her concern became more urgent when the HOA's insurer scheduled a wildfire risk review. The insurer wanted proof that Sagebrush Ridge had a workable secondary evacuation plan. The route had to be legally available, structurally safe, properly maintained, and accessible to emergency responders. Those were reasonable requirements. The fire district already had the emergency key. The bridge received professional inspections. The lane was kept usable and the ranch coordinated annual tests, but Valerie made a broader promise to residents. She told them the association would prove that it fully controlled both community exits. That wording mattered. There was a difference between having a documented emergency, right, and possessing day-to-day control over private property. Valerie began treating those ideas as though they meant the same thing. Around that time, Sagebrush Ridge released a long-term planning packet. Most of it involved ordinary projects: landscaping upgrades, pool repairs, road resurfacing, and new security cameras. One section showed a proposed equestrian and walking trail along the western edge of the neighborhood. The trail appeared to connect with part of the ranch lane before turning toward a scenic ridge. The planning notes described the route as compatible with wildfire access and community safety. That description made the proposal sound harmless, but the emergency corridor passed through a fenced working ranch. Opening it for recreation would place residents, horses, children, contractors, and pets near livestock gates, equipment routes, and operational areas that had never been designed as public space. I asked the board to correct the map. The trail remained marked as preliminary, but it was not removed. A few weeks later, Valerie sent the first formal key request. She wanted duplicate gate keys for herself, the property manager, another board officer, and the HOA's security contractor. Her brother Trent owned Knox Access Solutions, the company that maintained Sagebrush Ridge's electronic gate equipment. The Request did not identify one specific emergency. Gate. It asked for complete access. Sets. I responded with the fire district records, showing that authorized responders already possessed the only emergency key the community required. I also explained that my master ring included access to internal ranch, operations completely unrelated to Sagebrush Ridge. Valerie did not accept that distinction. She argued that the association could not certify a route it did not physically control. She pointed to years of maintenance contributions, the old developer map, and the HOA's responsibility to protect residents. During wildfire evacuations, none of those points explained why the board needed keys to livestock, gates, or private buildings. I proposed a joint route test with Chief Ortega. The fire district could inspect the box, open the designated gate, cross the bridge, confirm the lane, and document the entire process for the insurer. That would have proven the emergency system worked without surrendering private ranch control. Valerie did not schedule the drill. Instead, a second notice arrived. It gave me 10 days to provide 2 complete sets of keys. The notice warned that the HOA could take steps to recover what it described as community emergency access property if I refused. That was the first moment the dispute stopped feeling like a misunderstanding. The board was no longer asking me to demonstrate emergency access. It was claiming ownership of keys its own firefighters had never needed me to surrender. And hidden beneath that demand was another question Valerie had not answered. If the HOA only wanted access during a real emergency, why did it need permanent keys for board officers, a private contractor, and a trail the community had not yet received permission to build? I responded to Valerie's deadline by offering the most practical solution available. Chief Rachel Ortega could supervise a complete emergency route drill. Her crew could open the sealed responder box, unlock the designated western gate, cross the ranch bridge, follow the fenced corridor, and reach the county road on the other side. The insurer could observe the entire process. That would prove the route was legally available and operational without giving HOA officers permanent access to the rest of Red Willow. Valerie rejected the proposal. She claimed a fire district demonstration would confirm only that emergency responders could use the lane. It would not prove that Sagebrush Ridge itself controlled the route whenever the board believed access was necessary. That answer clarified the dispute. The HOA was not trying to verify emergency access. It wanted authority beyond the emergency agreement. I began comparing every map connected to the western route. The county fire district's version was precise. It showed one narrow corridor beginning at the Sagebrush Ridge boundary, passing through a designated gate, crossing the bridge, and continuing along a fenced lane to the county road. The HOA's map looked very different. Its highlighted access area widened after entering Red Willow. It included part of the ranch service yard, 2 internal gates, land near the equipment building, and a path extending toward the scenic ridge shown in the community's trail proposal. The extra areas served no evacuation purpose. Residents leaving during an emergency would not need access to livestock pens, storage structures, or ranch operations. Firefighters would not need a recreational path toward the ridge. The larger map appeared designed for more than safety. I brought both versions to the next HOA hearing. The clubhouse was crowded. Wildfire evacuation had become the most emotional issue in Sagebrush Ridge, and Valerie had spent weeks presenting the western route as something I was personally preventing the community from securing. I provided the fire district key log, the official route map, the agricultural tract plat, bridge inspection records, and my written offer for a supervised drill. Valerie did not dispute that firefighters already had a functioning key. Instead, she argued that emergency services could become delayed, personnel could change, sealed boxes could malfunction, and the HOA needed independent access as a backup. Then she shifted the discussion toward insurance. She reminded homeowners that the neighborhood had one ordinary entrance and suggested that my refusal could affect every family's coverage, safety, and property value. The room stopped focusing on the keys she had requested. Residents began focusing on the possibility of being trapped. Several homeowners supported the proposed drill. Others believed the HOA should possess its own copies in case the fire district failed to arrive quickly enough. A few asked why one rancher should control a route partly maintained with neighborhood money. Valerie had turned a documented emergency system into a question of whether I cared about the people living beside me. That pressure would have been difficult enough without her brother becoming involved. Trent Knox arrived at the ranch several days later to inspect electronic equipment near the shared boundary gate. His company maintained Sagebrush Ridge's security cameras, entry sensors, and access control systems. He had legitimate work to perform on the HOA side, and I allowed him to examine the shared panel under Lena's supervision. Trent spent more time studying the ranch gate office than the equipment. He photographed the exterior lock, the gate control cabinet, the fire district access box, and the small window beside the office door. Through that window, the serialized keyboard was visible on the interior wall. Lena noticed him looking toward it. He explained that he was documenting every access component for Valerie's insurance file. The keyboard was not part of the community system. The ring hanging there controlled areas far beyond the emergency corridor, but Trent had now seen exactly where it was stored. Looking back, that inspection was the first time Valerie's demand moved from paperwork toward physical access. Her next argument came through the HOA's financial records. Valerie produced years of payments connected to bridge inspections, hydrant testing, road grading, and servicing the firewater system. She claimed those expenses demonstrated that Sagebrush Ridge had invested in the western route as community infrastructure. Miriam Cho, the HOA treasurer, initially supported that interpretation. The association had spent substantial money on the system. From the board's perspective, it seemed unreasonable to fund infrastructure that remained under someone else's day-to-day control. But paying part of a maintenance obligation did not establish ownership. I reviewed the same records against the invoices maintained by Red Willow. The totals did not match. For the previous 2 years, Sagebrush Ridge had not paid its full percentage of several required expenses. A bridge inspection, water pump service, hydrant test, and erosion repair had all been completed on schedule because the ranch advanced the missing funds. I had not raised the issue publicly because the emergency system needed to remain functional. Arguing over reimbursement could happen later. Valerie was now using incomplete payments as evidence that the HOA owned what Red Willow had paid to keep operating. I sent Miriam copies of the outstanding invoices and requested a complete accounting. She acknowledged the discrepancy but said the board would review it after the insurance certification. The financial question was postponed. The ownership claim was not. Soon afterward, Sagebrush Ridge distributed a community newsletter describing the conflict. It stated that a neighboring landowner was refusing to release keys to a secondary evacuation route maintained partly through homeowner funds. It warned that the dispute could delay insurance approval and weaken wildfire preparedness. My name did not appear. It did not need to. Every resident knew which landowner controlled the western boundary. The newsletter omitted the sealed fire district box, the annual testing records, and my offer for a supervised drill. It also failed to mention that Valerie had demanded complete sets for board officers and a private contractor. The message made it sound as though I had locked an emergency exit and walked away. A few residents contacted me directly and asked for the records. Others began photographing the western gate from the neighborhood side. One homeowner posted online that ranch operations should not be allowed to override community survival. Then Lena found survey flags inside Red Willow. They did not follow the official emergency corridor. The markers continued beyond the bridge, passed near an internal livestock gate, and curved toward the scenic ridge shown in the proposed equestrian trail plan. A small contractor stake had been placed beside a ranch service path that was never included in any evacuation map. Photographed every marker before removing nothing. The pattern answered one question and opened a larger one. Valerie wanted the keys for emergency access, but someone was already marking land for a use the emergency agreement had never permitted. That was when I hired Naomi Brooks. Naomi began with my deed, the agricultural reserve plat, the fire district map, the key box records, the bridge documents, and every notice Valerie had sent. The deed clearly preserved ranch ownership. But it referred to a longer recorded agreement covering the bridge, emergency passage, water infrastructure, maintenance costs, and agricultural operations. The county's digital file contained several exhibits but not the complete operative document. One page showed the emergency corridor, another showed the bridge and water system. Neither explained who could possess keys or how far the HOA's rights extended. Naomi warned me that the missing provisions mattered more than either map. Before she could retrieve them, Valerie called a special board meeting. The board passed a resolution declaring all keys connected to the western secondary route to be HOA-controlled emergency assets. It authorized the management company and Knox Access Solutions to obtain, secure, duplicate, and distribute those keys for insurance and safety purposes. The resolution looked formal. It contained legal language, board signatures, insurance references, and an emergency justification. What it did not contain was proof that the keys belonged to Sagebrush Ridge. Valerie had transformed her demand into an official recovery order without first locating the agreement that decided whether the HOA had any right to recover them. The board resolution changed Trent's role almost immediately. Until then, he had been the contractor responsible for Sagebrush Ridge's electronic gates and security equipment. After Valerie signed the recovery order, he began acting as though the HOA had officially established ownership of every key connected to the western boundary. He returned to Red Willow 3 days later. Trent carried his contractor tablet, a tool case, and a printed copy of the resolution inside a clear work order sleeve. Valerie's signature appeared near the bottom, beside. Language describing the ranch keys as association-controlled emergency assets. He claimed he needed access to the shared electronic panel for an insurance inspection. That part of the request was reasonable. The control equipment near the Sagebrush Ridge boundary served both the community gate system and the fire district access point. I allowed Trent to inspect the components that fell within his contract. Lena remained with him throughout the visit. Before he began, I made the limits clear. He could inspect the shared sensors, camera connection, exterior power supply, and electronic control box. He could not enter the ranch gate office, access the keyboard, duplicate ranch credentials, or remove anything belonging to Red Willow. I directed him again toward the sealed responder box. If Valerie wanted proof that the emergency route could be opened, the fire district could provide it. The access log, annual tests, and Chief Ortega's records already documented the system. Trent did not accept that answer. He held up Valerie's work order and argued that the board had classified the keys as part of the community emergency route. From his perspective, the resolution gave him permission to collect and secure them on the HOA's behalf. I refused. The board could call the keys anything it wanted inside its own paperwork. That did not change what they opened or who owned them. My ring controlled the cattle loading area, veterinary storage, pump enclosure, equipment buildings, internal livestock gates, and sections of the ranch that had no connection to neighborhood evacuation. The lawful emergency key remained inside the fire district box. Trent completed part of the electronic inspection while Lena watched. He photographed the shared panel, tested a sensor, reviewed the exterior camera connection, and entered several notes into his tablet. Nothing appeared unusual when he left. That changed less than an hour later. Lena entered the gate office to prepare for a scheduled livestock transfer. The brass master ring was missing from its marked hook. At first, she assumed I had moved it. I had not. The key register remained inside the locked drawer beneath the board. The office showed no obvious damage. The window was intact, the exterior lock functioned normally, and none of the other tools or records had been disturbed. Only the serialized ring was gone. We checked every authorized person who had entered the office that week. No ranch employee had. Signed it out. Then Lena reviewed the surveillance footage. Equipment. Camera covered the exterior gate equipment. A second recorded the narrow office entry and part of the interior key wall. The video showed Trent completing his work near the shared panel. It also showed him returning to the office after Lena briefly walked toward the equipment yard to answer a radio call. He used the work order folder to push the door farther open, stepped inside, removed the brass ring from its hook, and placed it inside his tool case. The entire sequence lasted less than a minute. There was no confusion about what he had taken. The keys were visible in the footage, and their stamped brass tags matched the register. I contacted the sheriff's department before calling Valerie. A deputy arrived that afternoon. He reviewed the video, photographed the empty keyboard, copied the serial number list, examined Valerie's resolution, and recorded the limits I had given Trent before the inspection. Trent did not deny possessing the ring. He claimed he had acted under an official HOA work order identifying the keys as emergency access property. He believed he was recovering equipment that Sagebrush Ridge had paid to maintain, and had the right to control. The deputy did not. Stage an immediate arrest. The documents created a genuine dispute over what Trent had been told, and the keys had apparently been transferred to the HOA rather than hidden or sold. The incident still required investigation, but the officer preserved the footage, statements, serial records, and work order before referring the property question for legal review. The absence of an arrest did not reduce the operational problem. No one could confirm whether the keys had been copied, photographed, labeled, or tested against other locks after leaving the ranch. Lena paused the livestock transfer, scheduled for the next morning. The movement required access through several controlled gates and a veterinary preparation area. Until we verified the security chain, using the affected system would have created unnecessary risk. We inspected every lock associated with the missing ring. Staff schedules had to be changed. A livestock carrier was postponed. Veterinary support was rescheduled, and workers spent hours checking gates that should never have been part of an HOA dispute. No animals were harmed, but the interruption produced real costs, delayed ranch operations, and created a security concern across areas Valerie had never mentioned in her notices. While we were documenting those losses, Valerie presented the removal as a victory. She informed the board that Sagebrush Ridge had finally secured the western route keys after months of resistance. She scheduled an insurance demonstration and told residents that the association could now prove independent control of its second evacuation exit. The key ring appeared in photographs beside the HOA's developer map. Valerie did not tell homeowners that the sheriff had documented how it was removed. She did not explain that the ring opened private livestock and equipment areas. She described it as though Trent had recovered a misplaced community asset. Then the HOA attempted to test it. Trent returned to the western boundary with Valerie, Devon, and 2 board members. They tried the keys against the exterior emergency system. None worked. The responder box required a controlled fire district key that had never been part of my ring. The designated evacuation gate remained, governed by the same sealed access arrangement. I had explained from the beginning the HOA had taken a complete set of private ranch keys without obtaining a single credential needed for lawful emergency entry. That should have ended Valerie's claim. Instead, she argued that the wrong ring had been stored in the gate office and that additional keys might still exist somewhere on the ranch. She refused to return the set until the insurer's demonstration was complete. Possession had become more important to her than function. Naomi immediately sought a preservation agreement, preventing the keys from being copied, altered, distributed, or tested against private ranch locks. At the same time, she continued searching for the complete agricultural agreement. The next lead came from Henry Walsh. Henry had surveyed parts of Red Willow during the original Sagebrush Ridge development. He remembered the negotiations because the developer initially wanted the western Ranch Road treated like an ordinary subdivision. Exit. My grandfather had refused. Livestock. Gates could not be managed like residential gate arms. Ranch operations could not depend on an HOA, board changing access codes or distributing master credentials. Henry remembered a separate agricultural annex that addressed those concerns directly. The final agreement required emergency passage to remain available without, giving the association ordinary possession of ranch keys. That was why the fire district's sealed box had been installed. Henry also remembered language preventing the HOA from using emergency access for routine contractors, recreation, promotional tours, and community events. His memory connected the missing key provisions to the same agreement referenced in my deed. Using Henry's old project names and recording notes, Naomi traced the document through a title company that had handled the original land division. Its index led to a county archive entry filed under both the Agricultural Reserve Tract and the developer's infrastructure entity. The complete recording contained far more than the exhibits inside the HOA's digital file. It included the bridge ownership terms, firewater obligations, emergency route limits, agricultural protections, indemnity requirements, and an entire section governing access credentials. Naomi requested a certified copy. Before it arrived, Valerie announced the public insurance demonstration. Homeowners, the fire district, the HOA's risk consultant, and county representatives were invited to the clubhouse. Valerie planned to display my brass keyring beside the western route map and present it as proof that Sagebrush Ridge now controlled the evacuation system. By the time she placed those keys on the meeting table, Naomi had found the agreement explaining why the HOA was never supposed to touch them. The insurance demonstration took place inside the Sagebrush Ridge clubhouse on a Thursday evening. Valerie had arranged the room like a formal certification hearing. The HOA's enlarged developer map stood on an easel beside the board table. My brass key ring had been placed inside a clear evidence pouch near Trent's work order, the security resolution, and several years of bridge maintenance invoices. Nearly every chair was occupied. Homeowners filled the back rows. Chief Rachel Ortega attended with the fire district's route records. Marcus Avery, the insurer's risk consultant, sat near the center with an inspection tablet and a file containing the renewal requirements. Miriam had brought the HOA's financial binder. Trent stood beside Valerie as the contractor who had recovered what she still described as association emergency property. Naomi and I entered carrying the certified agreement. Valerie began with the same version she had repeated for months. She presented the western route as a community-funded emergency corridor that had been controlled by one uncooperative landowner. She treated the board resolution as proof that Sagebrush Ridge had corrected the problem. The keys on the table were supposed to show that the HOA could now open the route independently, maintain it, inspect it, and certify it to the insurer. For several minutes, the room appeared to belong to her. The map was large. The resolution looked official. The invoices showed real community expenses. Most residents had already seen photographs of the keys in the newsletter. Then, Marcus asked for a demonstration of the actual emergency access system. Rachel walked to the table and examined the ring, compared the stamped tags with the fire district's access log, and confirmed what Valerie had already discovered. Privately, none of the keys belonged to the responder box. The lawful emergency key remained sealed under fire district control. It had been inspected, tested, and documented without interruption. That was the first visible break in Valerie's presentation. She argued that the ring still provided backup access to the ranch. Corridor.Lena answered that claim with the ranch register. She matched each. Stamped serial number to a specific location on Red Willow. One key controlled the cattle loading gate. Another opened the veterinary storage room. Others belonged to the pump enclosure, equipment building, service yard, and internal livestock gates. None opened the responder. Box. None had been assigned to Sagebrush. Ridge. None was required for a declared evacuation. The HOA had taken a ring containing private, operating keys and then displayed it as proof of public safety control. Several residents began looking at the map differently. Valerie shifted to the money, insisted that Sagebrush Ridge had paid for the bridge, water tank, hydrant system, and road maintenance for years. In her view, those payments created more than a limited rite of passage. They created an ownership interest strong enough to justify direct control. Miriam opened the accounting binder expecting the records to support her. Naomi opened the certified agreement. The first operative section identified Red Willow as the owner of the bridge, the ranch lane, the gates, the cattle guards, the elevated firewater tank, and the hydrant connection. Sagebrush Ridge was required to contribute a defined percentage toward inspection and maintenance because the neighborhood benefited from those systems during an emergency. The payments purchased no title. They transferred no gate authority. They created no right to possess ranch credentials. That distinction changed the meaning of every invoice Valerie had displayed. The HOA had not been buying the infrastructure one inspection at a time. It had been satisfying part of a maintenance obligation, attached to a limited emergency easement, and the agreement narrowed that easement with unusual precision. Sagebrush Ridge residents could use the designated lane during a declared evacuation, an active emergency response, or a temporary closure of the community's primary entrance. Authorized responders could enter through the sealed fire district system. Outside those conditions, the lane remained private ranch. Property routine inspections required coordination. Contractor access required permission. Recreational use required permission. Community events required permission. The HOA could not open the route for convenience, simply because the board believed a broader use would benefit residents. Valerie then relied on the developer map. Naomi placed the recorded agricultural plat beside it. The official map showed one narrow corridor crossing the bridge and continuing to the county road. Valerie's version expanded the highlighted area into the service yard, internal gates, and land near the proposed trail. The complete agreement anticipated exactly that problem. It stated that internal maps, board resolutions, administrative databases, repeated use, maintenance payments, and security policies could not expand the recorded easement. The board resolution Valerie had signed did not create authority. The newsletter did not create authority. The larger map did not create authority, and physically taking my keys did not create authority. At that point, the meeting could have ended with a correction to the evacuation plan, but Naomi had found one more section directly addressing access credentials. The agreement required the emergency key to remain inside a sealed responder-controlled box. It specifically prohibited the HOA, its officers, managers, contractors, and agents from demanding, copying, confiscating, distributing, or retaining Red Willow's master keys. That language had been written decades earlier because my grandfather refused to let a residential board control livestock gates and working ranch areas. Valerie had not merely misunderstood a vague document. Her resolution authorized the exact act the agreement expressly prohibited. The room became quieter. Trent reviewed the paragraph, and then looked at the work order carrying his sister's signature. His responsibility did not disappear, but the document explained why he had believed the ring was association property. The classification had come from Valerie's resolution, not from the fire district. The deed, or the recorded agreement, Persis, still tried to keep the issue centered on safety. She argued that every decision had been made to protect residents from wildfire risk. That explanation weakened when Naomi introduced the trail records. Planning. Emails showed that HOA officers had discussed using the same western access for survey crews, future trail maintenance, equestrian events, and community marketing photographs. One message described permanent key possession as a way to avoid requesting ranch approval each time a contractor needed entry. The key demand had never been limited to an evacuation. It was meant to convert a narrow emergency right into routine, operational access. Several homeowners who had supported Valerie began asking Miriam to review the maintenance accounts. That review produced another reversal. The HOA had not fully paid its required share for the previous 2 years. Red Willow had advanced the cost of an urgent bridge inspection, firewater pump service, hydrant testing, and erosion repairs so the emergency system would remain available. Valerie had accused me of using community-funded infrastructure while refusing community control. The records showed that my ranch had covered missing HOA obligations to keep the same system functional. Marcus then addressed the insurance question. He remained neutral. He did not accuse Valerie of misconduct or declare that Sagebrush Ridge had no emergency route. He explained that the insurer needed a legally enforceable access plan, not physical possession of unrelated private keys. The existing fire district system could satisfy the safety requirement. The HOA's current certification could not. Its map exceeded the recorded corridor. Its resolution conflicted with the controlling agreement. Its contractor had removed private keys under disputed authority. Its maintenance records were incomplete. Those problems increased liability rather than reducing it. Coverage was not canceled that night, but renewal would require corrected maps, verified bridge and water records, an independent emergency access protocol, and confirmation that the HOA no longer claimed control over private ranch credentials. Valerie had blamed my refusal for threatening the insurance review. Her attempt to seize control had created the actual certification problem. The end of the meeting. The keys were no longer displayed as proof of HOA authority. They were placed back into the evidence pouch while Naomi requested written preservation terms. Valerie refused immediate return, claiming the board still needed legal advice. That delay forced the dispute into court. The hearing was narrow and practical. Naomi presented the surveillance footage, serial register, work order, deed, fire district log, and certified agreement. The HOA's counsel did not argue that my master keys opened the emergency system. Instead, the association asked to preserve the status quo while the broader access dispute was reviewed. The independent judge separated those issues. Genuine emergency passage remained available through the fire district. The neighborhood's safety did not depend on the HOA keeping my ring. The court ordered the keys returned through a documented evidence process, prohibited copying or use, and required both sides to preserve the footage, electronic records, maps, and work order history. The order did not resolve every financial claim. It did not decide the final cost of replacing locks, interrupting operations, or correcting the HOA's infrastructure accounts. But it answered the question Valerie had tried to settle by taking possession. She had sent her brother to collect the keys because she believed holding them would prove that Sagebrush Ridge controlled my ranch. The only thing those keys proved was that the HOA had crossed a boundary the recorded agreement had never allowed it to approach. The return of my keys happened 3 days after the court issued the preservation order. A sheriff's evidence technician brought the sealed pouch to Red Willow Ranch while Naomi, Lena, Trent, and an HOA attorney observed. Before the ring was released, every key was photographed, matched to its stamped serial number, and compared with the register my father had created years earlier. All of the keys were present. That did not mean the security problem was over. For nearly 2 weeks, the ring had been outside our control. No one could prove that the keys had not been photographed, traced, copied, labeled, or tested against other ranch locks. Trent said he had not duplicated them, and the records review found no invoice for copies. But uncertainty alone was enough to require a full response. Working Ranch could not operate on assumptions. We replaced every lock. Connected to the ring, the veterinary storage room received a new restricted cylinder. The cattle loading gate, service yard, pump enclosure, equipment building, and internal livestock gates were all rekeyed. We updated the serial register, changed employee sign-out procedures, and added a second camera inside the gate office. The cost was significant, but the larger burden came from the time required to complete the work without disrupting the animals. Lena reorganized staff schedules around the locksmith team. Livestock movements were divided into smaller groups. The delayed transfer was rescheduled, veterinary support was booked again, and the carrier was paid for the original cancellation. No animals had been harmed, but the interruption had created measurable losses. Those losses became part of the civil claim. HOA's insurer initially questioned whether the ranch had reacted too aggressively by replacing every affected lock. Naomi answered with the same point that had controlled the entire dispute. Once the association removed the master ring without permission, Red Willow no longer had a reliable chain of custody. The ranch had not created that uncertainty. The HOA had. Sagebrush Ridge and Knox Access Solutions eventually agreed to reimburse the rekeying expenses, the canceled transport fee, the additional staff hours, the security inspection, and part of the documented operational loss. The amount was substantial enough to matter, but not large enough to destroy the association. That balance was important. I wanted the ranch restored to the position it had been in before the keys disappeared. I did not want ordinary homeowners losing their houses because Valerie had refused to read a recorded agreement. Trent's responsibility was handled with the same restraint. He provided his complete work file, including Valerie's signed recovery order, photographs from the earlier gate inspection, internal messages, and the instructions directing him to obtain the ring. Those records showed that he had entered the gate office after being told not to do so. They also showed that he had relied on a board document, falsely classifying the keys as association property. The authorities did not present the incident as an elaborate criminal plan. Trent had not attempted to sell the keys, conceal their location, or use them to damage the ranch. His conduct remained unauthorized and serious, but the most realistic consequences came through civil liability, contract violations, insurance review, and professional accountability. Knox Access Solutions lost its Sagebrush Ridge contract. The company also had to revise its procedures so technicians could not rely only on a client's work order when handling access systems involving neighboring private property. Future jobs required proof of ownership, a recorded access right, or direct written consent from the property owner. Trent accepted those terms. He never offered an excuse that made the decision harmless, but he eventually acknowledged that he should have stopped the moment I denied permission. Valerie did not make that acknowledgement. Even after the keys were returned, she continued describing the dispute as a technical conflict that had interfered with her wildfire plan. She focused on the fact that Sagebrush Ridge needed a secondary exit and avoided the fact that firefighters had possessed lawful access the entire time. That explanation lasted only until the homeowners received the complete record. The first major correction involved the proposed trail. Naomi sent the board a formal demand requiring removal of every reference to recreational access across Red Willow. The easement did not authorize walking groups, equestrian events, survey crews, marketing tours, landscaping contractors, or future community facilities. The board removed the trail from its capital plan. Updated maps ended at the HOA boundary rather than continuing across the ranch. Promotional materials describing the neighborhood as connected to a private western riding route were withdrawn. Contractor survey flags were collected, and the planning consultant issued a corrected site drawing. The change disappointed some residents. Had purchased homes partly because the early marketing material suggested access to open land west of the development. But an advertisement could not create a property right that had never been granted. The second correction involved the emergency route. Chief Rachel Ortega did not allow the dispute to weaken real wildfire preparation. She developed a revised protocol with the county, the HOA, the insurer, and Red Willow Ranch. The designated corridor remained exactly where the recorded agreement placed it. The fire district retained control of the sealed responder key. Annual tests would be documented with photographs, timestamps, route conditions, and bridge inspection records. The HOA would receive proof that the system worked. It would not receive ranch master keys. The new plan also separated emergency access from every other proposed use. No board officer, property manager, security contractor, or resident could open the ranch lane during normal conditions. A declared evacuation, active emergency response, or temporary closure of the primary entrance remained the trigger. That distinction made the route safer rather than less useful. During a real evacuation, residents would follow one controlled direction instead of entering multiple livestock areas with unrelated keys. Fire crews would use the system they had trained on. Ranch staff would know exactly which corridor had been activated. Marcus Avery accepted the revised protocol for the insurance review. Sagebrush Ridge's policy was renewed after the HOA corrected its maps, confirmed the bridge condition, updated the water system records, and abandoned its claim of independent control. The premium still increased. The insurer identified governance failures, incomplete maintenance documentation, and the unauthorized key removal as new risk factors. But the community did not lose coverage, and the western route remained part of its emergency plan. That result answered one of Valerie's most effective accusations. I had never endangered the neighborhood by refusing to surrender my keys. Her attempt to take control had created the insurance problem she claimed she was preventing. The infrastructure accounting produced another difficult meeting. Miriam completed a full review of bridge inspections, hydrant tests, water pump servicing, erosion control, and road maintenance connected to the emergency corridor. The records confirmed that Red Willow had advanced expenses. Sagebrush Ridge was required to share some of the missing payments resulted from poor management transitions. Others had been postponed during budget disputes. Valerie's board had still used the total history of HOA contributions as proof of ownership, without checking whether the association had even met its current obligations. The corrected balance included overdue maintenance shares, interest permitted by the agreement, and part of the recent inspection cost. Sagebrush Ridge paid Red Willow from its reserve account and approved a limited homeowner assessment to restore the infrastructure fund. The assessment was unpopular. Residents had already paid ordinary dues and believed earlier boards had handled the emergency system properly. But the final amount was divided across 138 homes and structured over several months. It was inconvenient, not catastrophic. The community also gained something practical from it. The bridge received a new structural inspection schedule. The firewater pump was serviced. The hydrant connection was pressure tested. Erosion near the western lane was repaired. A digital maintenance calendar was shared among the ranch, fire district, HOA manager, and insurer. For the first time in years, everyone could see exactly who owned each system, who maintained it, and who paid each percentage. The accountability meeting took place after the insurance renewal was secured. The clubhouse was more crowded than it had been during the key demonstration. This time, the enlarged developer map had been removed. In its place were the recorded agricultural plat, the fire district route, the maintenance audit, the security footage timeline, and the controlling agreement. Miriam presented the financial corrections. Rachel explained that emergency responders had always possessed access, Marcus summarized why physical possession of private keys had never established legal control. Naomi documented the difference between the emergency easement and ownership. Lena explained how the missing ring had interrupted ranch operations. The facts did not leave Valerie much room to redirect the discussion. Homeowners learned that I had offered a supervised drill before the board passed its recovery resolution. They learned that the ring contained internal ranch keys rather than an emergency credential. They learned that the proposed trail required separate permission. They learned that Red Willow owned the bridge and water system. They also learned that the ranch had covered missing HOA expenses while Valerie publicly accused me of benefiting from community-funded property. Some residents still believed Valerie's original concern had been sincere. Believed that, too, Sagebrush Ridge had one normal entrance, wildfire risk was real, and the insurer's questions deserved serious answers. The problem was not that Valerie cared about safety. The problem was that each time a document limited her authority, she treated the limit as an obstacle to overcome. Rather than a boundary to respect, she had rejected the fire district drill. She had expanded the map. She had connected an emergency corridor to a recreational trail. She had converted maintenance payments into an ownership claim. She had passed a resolution before finding the controlling agreement, and when I refused to surrender unrelated keys, she sent her brother to take them. A recall petition had already gathered enough signatures before the accountability meeting ended. The vote took place several weeks later. Valerie campaigned on the argument that decisive leadership sometimes required action before every legal question was settled. Her supporters warned that removing her would discourage future boards from responding aggressively to wildfire risks. Most homeowners reached a different conclusion. Urgency did not excuse refusing to verify authority. Valerie lost the recall vote. There was no dramatic arrest, public breakdown, or courtroom confession. She collected her brown HOA portfolio after the final board meeting and left the clubhouse through the same courtyard where she had once presented the western route as association property. What she lost was not her home or livelihood. She lost the authority she had treated as unlimited. The management company also faced review. Its staff had entered Valerie's resolution into the HOA database without matching it against the recorded property documents. The system then described the ranch lane as a community-controlled emergency road, making the board's claim appear more established than it was. Sagebrush Ridge required the company to correct every record and adopt new title verification procedures. Future boards could not demand access to neighboring property without an independent legal review. Emergency rights had to be separated from recreational and contractor access. Maps used in board packets had to identify whether they were recorded plats, planning illustrations, or marketing materials. Contracts involving relatives of board members required written conflict disclosures and independent approval. No single reform was dramatic. Together, they made it much harder for another official-looking resolution to replace the document that actually controlled the land. Red Willow returned to normal gradually. The rescheduled livestock transfer went forward. The new locks became part of the daily routine. Lena updated the keyboard using a different numbering system, and the original brass ring was stored in a secured display drawer rather than hanging beside the office window. I considered retiring it completely. In the end, I kept it. The worn keys no longer opened every lock they once controlled, but they still belonged to the history of the ranch. My father's stamped numbers remained visible on the brass tags, along with the small scratches left by years of work. The ring had survived a dispute because Valerie believed possession created authority. Its real meaning had always been the opposite. Those keys represented responsibility limited to specific gates, specific buildings, and specific purposes. The same was true of the HOA's easement. Sagebrush Ridge kept its emergency route. Red Willow kept its ranch. The bridge and firewater system continued serving both properties under the recorded agreement. Rachel's crews tested the responder box each year, and I continued coordinating inspections without giving the board access it did not own. I did not punish the residents by closing the lane. They had not taken my keys. Most of them had simply trusted the map, newsletter, and resolution their president placed in front of them. The final lesson was visible every time I crossed the bridge. An agreement could allow shared use without shared ownership. Maintenance money could support infrastructure without purchasing control. Emergency authority could protect lives without. Erasing private boundaries, Valerie sent her brother to take my ranch keys because she believed holding them would give the HOA the power it lacked on paper. They had picked the wrong ranch, not because Red Willow was politically connected, unusually powerful, or protected by someone important. They had picked the wrong ranch because my family had preserved the records, maintained the infrastructure, documented every key, and understood the difference between cooperation and surrender. A key could open a gate. It could never rewrite the agreement deciding who had the right to use it.